Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Way T Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we're going to talk about a topic that is really close to my own heart and probably a lot of people listening. It's all about emotional eating. Yes, I'm an emotional eater. You might be too. Yes, we can all relate, but we're going to talk about that, the ego mindset, body image, the reason the body hangs on to weight, aka protection, gut hormone connection. And we have an expert. Amber Romaniuk is an emotional eating, digestive, and hormone expert who helps professional women achieve optimal health through mindful eating, self-care, and overcoming self-sabotage with food. I know this. I've been there. I get it. Her podcast, the No Sugarcoating podcast, has over 500,000 downloads, over 200 episodes, and listened to it over 82 countries. She was featured on TV personality Whitney Port's podcast. Amber has also appeared on local TV 50 times in the last 3 years alone. She's a fellow Canuck like myself. And here's some interesting info about Amber. She overcame her own emotional eating after gaining and losing more than 1,000 pounds and spending over 50 grand on binge foods and spending 5 years balancing her hormones and digestion. Now she helps others achieve body freedom, TM, trademark, so they have the confidence and health to create amazing lives. Bottom line, she said, I tried everything. I restricted calories, skipped meals, tried the latest fad diets, worked out 6 days a week, blew out my adrenals. But guess what? She got to her ideal weight, felt great, but it wasn't sustainable. However, that's all been corrected now, and Amber's going to share her secrets. Amber, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Wade. And epic intro. That was so good.
Well, I'm super excited about this because I think a lot of people, I think almost everybody, probably the large portion of the population is an emotional eater. Now, a lot of people think it's kind of on the depressive side. I'm actually an emotional eater on the happiness side. For me, I eat when I'm really, really, really happy, really, really in social conditions or environments and things like that. It's like, it's a party. Right. I do notice I will sometimes eat too if I have a challenging emotional piece, but this is an area that I think is a huge topic and why people self-sabotage. Would you say that's the
100%. It's because for what I know, the stats is about 90% of the female population and about 45 to 50% of the male. Correct me if I'm wrong or if you have another stat on that, but struggle with some form of, emotional eating, eating disorder, body image issue. That's significant.
Yeah. I think the other half of men just didn't answer the thing honestly.
Probably. Yeah.
So what is emotional eating and how would you categorize emotional eating off the bat? Let's talk about that first.
Yeah. So for me, emotional eating is any reason for eating other than for physical nourishment. And it's not necessarily just emotional, so I'm sad or I'm happy, so I'm going to eat. It's I'm fatigued. I feel like I got in, to a situation where I'm building the same habit where every night after dinner, I eat while I watch TV, right? I eat while I work. So it's really that lack of awareness with body and, feeling hungry and just eating and mindlessly numbing out and distracting yourself from reality and feeling your emotions. And I think there's different levels of emotional eating. And I really experienced all of those. So I think, for some people, it's minor emotional eating where you may have a bad day and you want to eat a half a chocolate bar, and then there's the next phase, which is you binge and eat to the point where you're so full, it's horribly uncomfortable and you're so bloated and you feel so, just in pain and frustration. And then there's the next phase, which is full-blown food addiction, which is I'm thinking about food all the time. I'm obsessing about food all the time. I don't want to binge, but I'm, not doing well on my diet. And so because I failed on my diet, here I'm falling way the other way. And you were probably like me, speeding to the store 10 minutes before it closes so you can buy your basket full of, binge food, go home, put on a movie, check out, and keep repeating it, day in and day out, hence the 50 grand in 5 years and the loss and gain of 1,000 pounds. And then of course we get into like bulimia and other things, but I think there's different kind of spectrums of it. And for some people it's less invasive, and some people it's very in their face and very destructive.
Someone's going to think right off that, like, you gained and lost 1,000 pounds. Wait a minute. How's that even possible? Like, did you weigh like 1,000 pounds at one time? Or did you actually like gain 20 pounds, lose 20 pounds, gain 50 pounds, lose 50 pounds?
Exactly.
What was the swing that you experiment, or when did you start to discover that you had an emotional based eating challenge?
Oh gosh, I think that was actually a couple years into like really, really bad binge eating. So the weight fluctuation, I think, started in my early teens. So I probably gained and lost more than 1,000 pounds. But when I was about 21, I went through a bad breakup and was like, oh, I'm going to get the revenge body and like look perfect. And that really triggered quick, fast weight loss, heavy restriction, over exercise. And so I reached quote unquote my goal weight at the time. And then about a month after that, I couldn't maintain it. And so that's where the switch like flipped and I started to binge. And so that gain was about 60 pounds. And so it was like every other month or every few months, I was up 30, down 20, up 40, down for like, it was just honestly every other month, I swear I was up and down with my weight and couldn't maintain. And so I didn't realize I was struggling with binge eating probably until at least, a year and a half or 2 years. And when I started to realize I'm always thinking about food, I have all sorts of cravings, I'm dieting, or I'm like completely going off the other way and, binging and just sitting at home, in self-loathing, shoving all this food to shove my emotions down. And when I went through a phase of about 6 months of binging and purging, that's when I also really realized like this, not that I wanted to say this is a problem, but I'm really struggling. And I think I'm starting to put together that I don't know how to cope with stress. And so I'm using food to try and cope. I'm using food to shove my emotions down because I'm afraid to feel. I don't love myself. I hate my body. I want to be thin. That's the epitome of happiness. And so I think all of that accumulatively, as I was learning that, made me realize that I was struggling with like full-blown food addiction, right? Like my sugar cravings were so bad that I swear to you, there was nights where I would be at a social event and go make up an excuse so that I could leave, get to the store before it closed, and like sometimes speeding, right? Because I'm like, I need to get that food. And, it's kind of crazy to think how addiction can drive people. And I just always say, thank God I wasn't addicted to drugs, because I likely probably would not be here, just with the fatal attachment to that. So, yeah.
I think it describes something I think that a lot of people have experienced at some point to varying degrees, but I want to talk a little bit about maybe the background. I think a lot of in the men's world, there's a thing called muscle dysmorphia, men who think that they're too small. And I think on the other side, for women, it's women who think that they're too big, and the comparison analysis. And many of this is traced to developmental times. Was there a time maybe early on in your life as you became a developing woman in your teens or whatever, where you start to get into that comparison or feeling self-conscious about how you looked? And do you think that was maybe one of the things, or is that just something that developed after the breakup?
No. So for me, I was 5 and it was my first day on the bus, and the older boys called me fat and ugly. And that really hit home for me. And I took it on and believed them because I didn't know what confidence was. I didn't know how to brush off a comment when half the bus is laughing at you. It was a very like hurtful and mortifying experience. So that, coupled with my mom really struggling with body image her whole life, being overweight, having multiple sclerosis, always talking about how she hated herself and hated her body, like hearing that regularly, and also then seeing her eat all the time, right, and revolve life around food, it really made me, I think I just took that on too and thought, oh, it's normal to be insecure and it's normal to talk negatively about yourself. And then the third thing was the conditioning I received from TV, music videos, celebrities, magazines, like all this stuff that tells you you need to look this way and fit into this box to be popular, rich, loved. And so I really believe that, wow, like I need to look like that. So how do I get there? Okay, well, diets, exercise, restriction. So for me, those were kind of the accumulative. And then the breakup was just the like, maybe this is finally like the way that I get there.
So there's a gap though between when you're 5 and 21. So did this like, was this kind of just an ongoing thing, but 21 was
Yes,
kind of the breaking point that was like,
totally. Because I was subconsciously emotionally eating like all through growing up. I just didn't know that I was, because I thought it was normal to sit down and turn on the TV and eat, half a box full of cookies and chocolate bars, etc. Because my mom was doing the same thing. So I really inherited the food addiction from a very young age, but didn't realize until I was looking back and going, wow, that wasn't normal. But because there was no like portion or like any talk of anything like that. It just is the way that I grew up. And then it was when I restricted and that switch flipped, and I was like going to the bakery to buy like 10 cupcakes and, eating Costco sized pumpkin pies, that I'm like, this is not normal, right? This isn't healthy. Obviously I'm not
right.
feeling well. But I dieted all through my teens anyway, right? And had those ups and downs, but I just was so unaware of any of it until that switch flipped.
Is some really great stuff. And I think I want to share for you as a woman, because I think a lot of times in our early relationships, men can act or say things that are very insensitive to a female, and vice versa. It can go vice versa. But can you talk about, was there anything particularly that happened within the relationship? Was it just that you felt that he left you for somebody else, or he wasn't attracted to you, or he said something to you? Was there a trigger point for our male listeners to say, hey, look what you need to be mindful of what you say as words and what you can say, or the impact? Or was there just a overall thing that you came to this conclusion yourself?
Yeah. So what's so interesting about it is it was never about the weight for him. And when I lost the weight, and, we had a conversation about it after we'd broken up, and he's like, it was never about the weight. What had happened in the relationship is, because I didn't love myself, I started to essentially like become obsessed with him, and him needing to love me, and him needing to fix me and fill my void. And I was very controlling because I was so insecure. And so it created a lot of conflict. And obviously he had his own stuff, like,
Sure.
just the fighting got more and more and more, and just, it got so unhealthy. Like it was making me sick, but I didn't realize that the stress from the relationship was like, my face was going numb. Like I had all these weird neurological symptoms coming up, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And as soon as the breakup happened, all the symptoms went away. So I took it to mean like, oh man, it's because I'm not good enough. That's why he's breaking up with me. But it was just such an unhealthy dynamic, because I lost myself because I didn't know who I was in the first place. But I think for me, the one thing that, I could have wished for at that age was more transparency, so instead of the breakup just happened, he was like, oh, let's just go on a break and like have hope, like everything will work out in a few months. And then like in a few months down the road, having that second breakup, like just be transparent with the person. Like don't lead them along for X amount of months after you already hurt them. Cause when you're 21, right, you're just so in this denial of like, oh yeah, it's totally going to work out because I'm going to look perfect. Right. And I'm glad it didn't, because it wasn't meant to be, and it's fine. But it's so interesting, how that experience completely shaped and set up my future road, which has been incredible. Right. But stuff has to happen.
These are really good points. And as a guy that's deep into his middle age now, I've learned something, and that is the quality of your life is determined by the amount of difficult conversations that you have with people. And I can't emphasize that enough to people within relationships and wanting to get in relationships, is to really get down to the conversation and have an open and honest conversation. And that is really, really hard in today's world, I think, because I think there's a big variance in the ability of, number one, emotional awareness, and there's a big variance in articulation. And I think typically a lot of men, and I know myself would fall in that categories, would struggle with expressing emotions that you might feel. And a woman who might be more versed in sharing their emotions or talking in that thing, what happens is the guy shuts up and feels inadequate in the communication. And it comes out either as he shuts down, he gets angry. And then the woman's like, well, what the hell's going on? And he just doesn't have the languaging or doesn't know how to do it. And that was a pattern that I noticed in my own stuff and in relationships. What is it for the female side, just not to put words in your mouth, what is it for a woman when who she wants to communicate things to men? What holds a woman back? You would say, or with your girlfriends yourself. And of course it's going to vary from person to person, but what are some common elements?
Yeah, I think it's really, like the fear of being rejected, that shutdown happening. I think that's a big one. And or like not wanting to push them away. Because I dealt with that in the beginning of the relationship I'm in now, where my boyfriend would, I'd be like, oh, there's a conflict here. Let's talk about it now. Let's resolve it now. And he'd be like, no, I'm not ready to talk about it yet. And so I would be like, oh, I'm getting rejected when it had nothing to do with me. But I think one of the things that really helped with that is just holding space and like allowing for the emotional exchange to happen like naturally when it's meant to, versus like the woman being like, well, I'm more emotional and I'm a talker, so let's talk it out now, knowing that men more naturally maybe need to just go and process their emotions, so that you don't end up getting so fired up and saying something you're going to regret. Because I know that's what he said to me. He's like, I just need some time because I don't want to say something that's going to upset you, right? And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So, but I think that was my big fears in the past, and now I'm like so good with it and so neutral, and we have such an open communication, and he now feels so safe sharing all of his emotions and vulnerabilities and like struggles. And it's so great, but it's because I've held a safe space, judgment-free space. But yeah, I totally used to experience that. And I feel like because your ego takes over, because you want to have control and you want to have it be dealt with in the moment, it's the ego that then pushes the conflict further and can shut the other person down further, because you're trying to control them. They don't want to be controlled. So their ego takes over. And that's, for me, intuitively where the shutdown comes along.
Beautifully said. And let's talk about, you're going through your series for listeners where you're on that roller coaster. What was the point? What was the breaking point for you to get off it? What happened?
Yeah. So a few things. So I'm like in a crappy retail job. I'm alone. I'm just physically, my health is continuing to get worse. I'm more bloated, more inflamed, like literally have no money in my bank account. And I had just finished a binge, and I was sitting on my couch, and I was crying because I was just thinking, I don't know if I'm going to make 30 if I keep treating my body this way. I'm causing so much destruction physically, mentally, and emotionally. How can my body possibly keep up with this? But I don't know how to stop. And then, I had finished the binge and thrown the food in the garbage. And about an hour later, I was like, well, if this is the last time I'm going to do this, I might as well eat a bit more. And so I dug through the garbage, felt really ashamed. And then I'm like, I'm going to go throw it out in the garbage outside. And then I went back later and ate from the garbage outside. And I was like, wow, this is seriously a problem. But I needed that to happen, because what was blocking me was the fear of the unknown. Who am I going to be without food? Who would I be if this wasn't a problem? Right? Who is this person if she deals with this and overcomes it? And can I do it? And what if I fail? And so the fear of that, all that unknown, was blocking me and keeping me in the suffering. And in that moment, the suffering got bigger than the fear to want to change, or the fear of the unknown. And I'm like, I have no clue what this is going to look like, but I'm done suffering. And I just envision myself with like this little knife in the midst of like beginning her journey in the Amazon jungle with like no path. Right. But I was just determined. I'm like, obviously this has happened for a reason, and I need to figure it out now.
So what did you do?
So a lot of it at first was just like blindly, like, trying to find a trail. And so the first thing I did was I really started to learn about sugar, because for me, like my refined sugar cravings were through the roof, and I always lost control with it. And I just couldn't understand, like, why can't I just have a little bit? Why do I start eating this, feel high, and then eat, way too much? And so when I started to understand that sugar was 10 times more addictive than cocaine, and that it excited the same part of the brain as heroin does, and that it was feeding my candida, like my horrible, like bad candida imbalance, and making me crave it and throwing my blood sugar off, I started to become fascinated with how it was impacting my physical body and my mood, because when I would try to cut it out, I would just essentially feel like so in the dumps, like just be so down, like going through a withdrawal. And so then that led me to the gluten, because I was noticing, okay, I'm not just eating sugar, but the baked goods are all gluten based. And when I learned that that did the same thing to the brain and like my gut and the bloating, and I'm just like, what? And then I'm thinking, why is this even allowed in food? Like, as I'm discovering this stuff, like, why would they put this in food knowing that it's like harming our health? So I went through this kind of like anger, frustration, like period, because I just couldn't believe that this could be allowed. And then dairy was the third thing. And it was for all the same reasons, the digestive issues, the candida, the neurotransmitters, and the casein, and the casomorphins that do the same thing as the sugar and the gluten, exciting the brain and causing that high. And so after dozens of attempts, I cut them all out, because for me, I needed to do that to help with the addiction. I don't suggest everybody do that. A lot of my clients don't have to do that. However, it was just so severe for me. I'm like, I need to cut all these out. I think this will help me in my progress. So I started, I went gluten and dairy and refined sugar free, and like really got good at making recipes and just like being in the kitchen more and making alternatives for everything that I wanted. But it's when I still wanted to binge on like bananas and a whole jar of peanut butter that I realized that it went a lot deeper than food, and that I was just using food as the coping mechanism. And so that's when I got into the emotional part of the journey. So it was like, I don't love myself. I'm still wanting to like be a certain weight. I'm obsessed with the scale. I'm still in assumption that a diet's going to fix me. I don't know how to feel my emotions. I don't know how to handle stress. So that was that whole discovery of all of these things that had created this void within me, this lack of self-love, and I'm still trying to fill it with food.
Beautiful, beautiful. How long did that whole journey take to kind of get to the point where you recognize, okay, there's an emotional issue here that I got to deal with?
About 2 years. Yeah.
And then what was the trigger point for you to say, okay, there's an emotional side? Did you go anywhere? Did you find info, or what did you do at that point?
I read Louise L. Hay's You Can Heal Your Life, and that really helped me to understand. Yeah, right. That really opened me up, not only to like the emotional, but like the emotional manifestation of physical imbalances and how our cells are listening to our thoughts, and like the manifestation side and energy. And so that for me was a big part. And I really realized I don't have any healthy ways to cope with stress. So that's where I started a self-care routine, and I took up meditation and yoga and breathing and got a journal, and really got into reading self-help books, because it fulfilled me. And it was just like lighting me up to learn all these things about the mindset and the body and how they're connected. And so essentially what I did was I started to make a list of all the different things that I was noticing would trigger me to binge. And so I had this list plastered all over my apartment to remind me, okay, before you leave to go to the store and like buy your binge food, like look through this list and try and figure out what's triggering you. And then depending on the trigger, what kind of self-care can I go into to help calm me down, right? And prevent me from continuing to repeat this pattern. And so as I got into this routine, the urge to binge reduced, because I was unwiring this neural pathway in my brain and creating a new one that is, it's okay, it's safe to feel, and I can handle this in a healthy way. And that was so empowering, like to drive to the store and sit in the parking lot even, and then go, I don't need to go in there, and then drive home. Like it was those kinds of wins that really just helped me to push forward and go, I can do this. So that self-care routine was really important, and starting to catch the negative self-talk, recognizing I had an ego and my ego didn't have my greatest good in mind, and recognizing what it felt like to be in my power versus giving my power away, learning how to say no, set boundaries, stop being a people pleaser, stop being a perfectionist, because that was all the insecurity, right? Me wanting to prove and overgive. And so the more I, went on these deeper layers of the journey, the more I discovered all these disempowering parts of me that weren't serving me. And I started to deal with them. And it was scary at first, because it's uncomfortable when you're a people pleaser and you start saying no, but it got easier. And so dealing with all that really ended the food addiction, and I filled the void. And I no longer wanted to diet or, be on the scale every day or hurt myself with food, because that's what I realized is I'm hurting myself with food and I'm punishing myself. And this binging is an act of self-hate. And I don't want to do that to my body anymore. So that was very powerful, because the last gift that gave me, other than, of course, my business, was me discovering I had this intuition. It's not just certain people who are special and are intuitive and can feel stuff. Like, I have this. And that was incredible, because obviously, since 10 years ago, it's grown exponentially, and it's such a great tool in my life and in my business now. But it was just scary as heck at first to be like, oh my God, I can feel and I can like kind of see things that are coming. And that shut me down for a while. And it did trigger some binging, because I was so scared of that coming up. But then once I embraced it and started to use it to my favor, so many good things started happening in my life because I was in alignment.
Beautifully said, and a great journey. And then how long did you say it would take you to kind of figure out all those components as well? So this is a long journey that we're having here, but I think it's relative for people to listening that, hey, it's not necessarily an overnight thing. You could get there a lot faster, but you're just figuring this all out on your own.
Exactly. Like, there was one time I was like, maybe I'll try see a psychologist. I don't really have the money, but I'll just give it a go. So I went to one session, and I'm not going to, say they're all like this, but I had a really poor experience. And essentially, out of the hour and a half appointment that I went to and the $300 I spent, she said, you just need to not drive to the store, and you need to learn how to love yourself. And here's like the pyramid of like how you're going to come down the mountain. And I'm just thinking, you have no idea. Like, you have no idea what I'm going through. Like, maybe you have an education. And like I said, everyone has their place, but it was just so disappointing to feel the lack of empathy and understanding, because she hadn't gone through it herself. So that was like my sign that I needed from the universe. That's like, no, you need to do this on your own. Because obviously I just didn't know at the time was going to be helping other people, but I just always felt I need to do this on my own for whatever the reason was at the time. Right. So,
I find the people that have had the greatest struggles in life often become the greatest advocates and educators for whatever that solution is.
mm-hmm.
And I would encourage all our listeners out there that if you're struggling with something, consider the possibility that what you're struggling with is actually potentially your greatest asset. I've got a book on my shelf, The Obstacle is the Way. And that was the case in how I ended up starting our own company. Was a crisis in my own life.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of Masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on Masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at Masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at Masszymes.com.
I'm curious as to, so once you solve this problem, you realize that other people had the same problem. Because once you kind of solve the problem for yourself, you kind of get out of your own story. It's like,
totally.
Okay. And then all of a sudden you start to recognize it in other people, and you want to help them. And sometimes they're not ready to get helped. And you want to be like, I can fix everybody. But somehow you created this whole business and a podcast. And I was like, what happened after that transformation? If you figured this out, you followed the patterns, you solved this lifetime of what could have been permanent struggle and even an early untimely death. You overcome it, you figure it out, you solve it, then what?
Yeah. And so it was in the midst of me really, filling the void and healing that emotional part that people started to ask me, because I was talking more about food and health, and they're like, what are you doing? And like, wow, like you seem to know a lot, and like, wow, you healed that gut thing. Like, how did you do that? And then, as I started to share that I was had struggled with emotional eating, all my friends and like every woman I ever came into contact with opened up and started to share her story. And it blew my mind because I'm like, you struggle with this, or you struggled with this, as if you did. Like, you seem like you have the perfect life, right? Because that's the assumption. And so that really inspired me, because I thought, if I struggled with this in the way that I did, how many other people are struggling with this, whether it's on a lower level, the same, or a higher level? Obviously, there's a lot of people that need help with this. And I just knew right away that that's what I wanted to do, and that I wanted to specialize in the body image, emotional eating piece, and then like really gut and hormone health, because I had the worst hormone issues. Like, my cortisol was 6 times higher. My estrogen was 10 times higher. My progesterone was too low. My thyroid was underactive. I had high homocysteine and high C-reactive protein, like, like I swear to you. And I was like 25 when I was like working on this stuff. So it's like 25 and my blood work's like just horrible. Right. And, it was great because I got to learn how to really find, these sweet spots and what it feels like to be symptom free and how it looks on the blood work. And so I think going through all of that really it was just such a sign for me that I knew I wanted to specialize in that stuff. And that's what really started my business. And it's been 7.5 years now, which is like been so awesome. And the more because I'm always working on myself, like the journey never stops. And it's great though, because the more I work on myself and deal with my, and next layers that come up, the more I can benefit and help my clients and just people listening to the podcast. So, but that's how it really shifted, because people were interested in what I was doing and asking.
I think there's a big news flash out for people, because, I coached hundreds of fitness competitors. We're talking national champions, international champions, girls who were on the cover of magazines, and also men in the same level, particularly. And I think it was extraordinarily shocking how many of the quote unquote women that people aspired to look like, if they actually knew the struggles that person was having, both psychologically, emotionally, and their relationships, their body image, their self-love, and all that stuff, be frightening to how many of those girls were actually struggling or masking behind a perfect body some deep emotional components. And even with the who's who that I coached back in the day, people that had it all, what I called, they lived the life with the golden handcuffs. They had the houses and the cars and the family and the country club and the cottage in the country and all that sort of stuff. And they would come to me because they had these weight issues. And I said, well, we can solve that. But but what we really need to get to, and this is going to be the journey, is what you think you're going to get from having that body. That's going to be the part that's going to be the real journey here.
Yeah. And
I've never lost sight of that, because so many people think that everybody else has got it figured out. And I'm here to say, I don't have it all figured out. Nobody has it all figured out. We're all just struggling along the planet. And finally we can kind of get to an age where we just go, yeah, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. So let's talk about your podcast. Let's talk about your business. So what is it that your podcast does in your business, and how does that help people who might be struggling with emotional eating?
Yeah. So, the podcast is great because it really allows people to get a feel for me, my energy, what I've been through. I always share like stories of my past experience, of course, sharing observations of clients and similar struggles in a mindful, confidential manner. And really then also just like, as I continue to grow and deepen my relationship with myself and gain more freedom from my ego, sharing those experiences, those thoughts, learning about all the conditioning, the psychological conditioning that has been put on us, since we've been young, and helping people understand, like, this is not your fault. Like, we've been set up to fail on every level from the big systems. And so as I learn, I share. And then from there, what I find is a lot of people who listen to the podcast, if it's resonant for them, then they'll reach out and they'll book in and we'll connect one-on-one and we'll explore, private coaching or group program. And I have an online program coming out soon too. But that's really a big part of my business, is supporting my clients one-on-one or in one of those levels, and helping them with the things that, we're talking about. It's very rare that I get someone who it's only a gut issue or it's only a hormone issue. It's usually all of the above. And then, also with a podcast, it's about education. It's about empowering. It's about bringing on guests like yourself, who have, very powerful personal experiences themselves that can share and provide so much value. So that's just really important for me. And it's also about community, because I'm all about, supporting like-minded businesses and people who also have other humanity's greatest good in mind and your health in mind versus the opposite. So that's another part of my business and podcast that I love, is just having that space for other people as well. And I do love podcasting. It's been so cool. I've had some really cool interviews, last year traveling to LA with Whitney, and then another woman in Malibu. Is just having that kind of exposure. I'm just very grateful for, because I've gotten so many women coming forth who want the support, and just hearing the story, it's so relatable for them. And I think that's been so important for me, to be super authentic and transparent. I have nothing to hide. If it's going to help someone, let them know they're not alone. Like, that's a huge goal for me, because whether or not they come to work with me, if they just know that, I've done my job, right?
What are some of the challenges or obstacles that you see that women have, which holds them back from getting the assistance they need in this area? Like, common elements that you've noticed.
Yeah. Fear of failure is a huge one, because they're all perfectionists, all or nothing kind of people, because they've been conditioned by diets that you have to follow it like this. You have to go X, Y, Z. You can only eat these foods. And then every time they fail, they lose a bit more hope and faith in themselves that they can heal and overcome. So by the time they get to me, they're kind of on their last leg. Like, they've tried all the diets, they've taken thousands of dollars worth of supplements. And while we know supplementation is important, if you're binging every day and you're just have expensive pee, right? So they've gone and gotten all the testing done, but the testing doesn't help them understand their inner emotional struggles and their, all that stuff. So it's fear of failure. It's not knowing if I'm going to have enough time to dedicate to the journey, because again, the perfectionist and the overbooked schedule. So that's another, really limiting belief, and, fear of the unknown. So who will I be without these things? Then the last one is, I don't know if I'm worthy to have this. I don't know if I'm worthy to heal. I don't know if I'm worthy to overcome emotional eating. And I don't know if I'm worthy to love myself and, deal with this diagnosis and empower myself from it or overcome it.
What are some common elements that women or men, because I think there's men in this category, and I don't want to make it all dominant to women, because there's a ton of men suffering out there who might not realize it. What are some common indicators that you may be an emotional eater or have an emotional issue that's triggering you to have these type of, binges or whatever?
Yes. Yeah. And so because for some people they say, well, I don't binge. And for some they go, well, I don't even know if I emotionally eat. So I think it's so important to get clear. So if you're finding regularly that you are finishing your meal and then you're still drawn to the cupboard because there's some trigger food in there that you love, and you can't keep certain foods in the house, like that's a sign of emotional eating. If you can't keep, I have some people that can't keep nut butter in the house because they'll eat the whole jar, let alone ice cream, right? And like really processed foods. So if that kind of stuff's happening, that's a struggle with emotional eating. Definitely as well. If you can't stop thinking about food, it's kind of like the ego versus yourself in your head going, oh, you should go and eat that. And then the other part of you going, no, don't eat that. You shouldn't have that. Like, you need to follow your plan and lose this weight. So there's that like Jekyll and Hyde going on back and forth. It gets really exhausting. Food fears. So maybe you've done different diets that are really restrictive, and now you're afraid to eat an apple or a carrot, or maybe you're afraid to eat sugar because you've, in the past just had so many negative experiences where you've lost control. So that's another sign of emotional eating. And then really people who've tried diets and think and are convinced that the diet is going to fix everything. It's going to fix the weight. It'll help me have the willpower. I won't have the cravings anymore. Sticking to this diet means I can't eat any of these foods. So that should resolve all the other issues. So that's another sign. And then being asphyxiated with weight and the external body image and the scale, because I often find, obviously, there's a struggle with self-worth. And then what's happening is when, either man or woman is getting on the scale and they don't like the number they see, well, then that's triggering them to self-sabotage with food, because what's the point? I don't care. And that all or nothing mentality, that is a huge part of emotional eating, because the person's either all in with their diet plan, their exercise plan, and as soon as one little thing happens and it interrupts that progress, they think that, oh, I failed. This isn't going to work anymore. So screw it. I'm just going to go all way the other way and eat whatever I want because I've been restricting myself. So I find those are some of the more common signs, like maybe you emotionally eat and then you feel insecure in your body and you don't want to go out and be social, right? Because you feel ashamed, and or maybe you are afraid to go to social outings for fear of being tempted and you're going to lose control, stuff like that.
Really, really great information for people. Let's say you kind of heard this podcast and you said, I think I might be an emotional eater. I think I might be struggling here. What are your suggestions or steps that a person needs to take? And what are the consequences if they don't?
Great question. So number one, try to not be hard on yourself, have shame or embarrassment, because so many people struggle with it and there's so many layers to it. It's just such a, complex thing that it's just to fault yourself is not fair for you. I think the next thing that's so important is to actually start to become aware of the difference of physical and emotional hunger, right? Because it's a very different feeling, but a lot of people don't even know what physical hunger feels like. So how can you possibly know what emotional hunger is? And so, before you reach in the cupboard, or even, before you have any snack, is just to check in and go, is this physical or emotional hunger? Okay, physical cues, my stomach's growling, my blood sugar's dropped, I'm dizzy, I'm lightheaded, I'm hangry, I'm tired. I look at the clock, I haven't eaten in 3 hours, 5 hours, however long. So I physically likely do need to nourish my body, versus the emotional hunger, like I'm stressed, or I always associate eating and working or watching TV. I'm rushed, I'm on the run, I'm overwhelmed, I'm tired, I haven't drank enough water. Like there's so many, emotional reasons. So I think asking that question and starting to explore that answer for yourself is important, because I find 90% of the time the answer is emotional hunger. It's very rarely that it's actually physical hunger. And if it is, I always encourage people to get into a good food prep routine where you're prepping, really good quality, nutritious meals and snacks to help set you up for success through the week and allowing for indulgence. But if you don't have good food available, it's really hard to set yourself up for good food choices, as we know. From there, I think it's really important to start to make note of different things you notice trigger you. So is it the news? Is it a friend or a family member? Is it work? Is it your overbooked schedule? Are you not drinking enough water? That's a huge trigger for a lot of people. Same with fatigue. Same with over exercising and not eating enough, or overeating and then needing to go and punish yourself in the gym. Negative emotions. That's another big one. People do not know how to feel their feelings, or they're afraid to, right? We've been taught to just shove that down. So make a list, start writing them down and explore what, my finding continues to come up for me. And also, stop trying to buy diet programs to fix this, because it's just not going to work, because the diet doesn't help you learn to love yourself or help you identify what's, triggering you, or helps you define the difference between physical or emotional hunger. It often fuels more of a perfectionist mindset, all or nothing, more fears around food. And so I always encourage people to, yes, I want you to nourish your body, but anything that's restrictive, it's very important to wean off, because I believe there's such thing also called diet addiction, where people they thrive off of oh, I failed, but this one looks great. And there's a serotonin and dopamine high. And then they pull out their credit card and they buy that next program. They're like, this is going to be the one. And then they get all excited, and then they get a week or two or a month in and they fail again. And then there's the drop, and not right. Like that's an addiction in itself. So for some people, starting to break apart that diet addiction dynamic is really important too. So, and then the last thing is honestly, and whether or not, you come to me or you listen to my podcast, it doesn't matter, but it's get help. Like if you've been struggling with this for years or decades, likely I would highly encourage you to get help, because it's a very complex journey. And it is hard to figure it out on your own. It's totally possible. And if you're meant to do it on your own, you will. But what if investing in your time and your money and yourself in this with, people or someone that can really help you, gives you such a life of freedom and being able to live a full life moving forward? Because let's face it, the costs or consequences of not doing anything about this impact every area of your life. So you spend a lot of money on clothes and, multiple clothing sizes in the closet, on diets, personal trainers, quick fixes, testing, and maybe trying to see doctors. And, again, that may help one aspect of your health, but it's not addressing the emotional eating. It costs you relationships potentially. It costs you advances in your career. It could cost you starting a business or taking your business to that next level because you don't feel worthy and you don't want to be seen. So you're not going to take that speaking gig or that TV gig or whatever it is because you're so ashamed of your body. And also from a manifestation standpoint, if you're energetically at such a low vibration because you feel so insecure with your body, it's really difficult to manifest what you want: relationships, abundance, business. Like, I swear to you, your health really dictates the health of your business on all levels. So it's so important to be in a balanced place, because I can tell you when I'm on point, I'm manifesting. And in the past, and when I started to articulate, wow, that the way I'm showing up really indicates how much is coming into my world, it really made me realize how important that part was. And then, of course, it costs a lot with your physical health. Like, I have so many clients that literally admit to me, they go, I know me struggling with this for years is why I have, IBS or cancer or arthritis or whatever it is. They just know. And they're so devastated because they let it go for so long and just thought they'd be invincible forever. Right. So it costs you your health. That's, out of all of it, that's the biggest one, because how can you show up and live a full life if you're not well?
So well said. Can you share with our listeners, listen, and I'm going to just do a plug. Look, they need to contact you. They need to get a hold of you. You're struggling out there. There's help. There's places you can go. Can you share with where people can reach out to you and kind of find out, dip their toe in the waters, if you will, that they can find out the service that you offer and the group and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So they can go to amberproof.ca. I have a free emotional eating quiz there. And once they take that, it sends them some really awesome videos and just like tidbits to help plant seeds. I offer a 30-minute complimentary body freedom call so people can book in on my website and pick a time, and we'll talk through what's holding you back. What are you struggling with? What are your goals? What are your health complaints? And just really have a great conversation. It's a safe space for you to feel comfortable and come and maybe for the first time share, with someone that you've been dealing with this. And even that in itself and being able to get it off your shoulders is such a healing opportunity. And then with the podcast, it's the No Sugarcoating podcast. It's available on my website and all podcast apps, over 260 episodes now. So there's lots of content for people to dip their toe in and listen and see if it's resonant. But those are some of the best ways to check things out. And then in the new year, again, I'll be getting into more of an online program for people who just want like a little intro and a taste. But yeah, it's all about seeing if it's in alignment. That's the key.
Amber, this podcast has been really awesome, and I've seen so many people struggle, and I really want to honor you and thank you for sharing and sharing your own stories and these type of things, and also creating a space and an opportunity for people to get the help they need. You're doing a great service in the world. It's so much alignment with what our mission at Bioptimizers. I want to thank you so much for being on our podcast. For our listeners, we have any show notes, any closing words for our listeners before we go?
Oh, just that everyone's worthy to heal and learn how to love themselves and have optimal health. It's not, again, just special people. Everyone has the opportunity. If you show up and you do the work at your pace and just be patient with your journey, you will totally get there, and you will be grateful that you did.
Beautiful words from a truly beautiful woman helping so many people live a beautiful life. Amber, thank you so much for joining us today. And for all our listeners on the Awesome Health Podcast, all of the links that Amber talked about today is here in the show notes. Go over, please check out her podcast, the No Sugarcoating Podcast. Join her group, take the quiz, get a consultation. It might just change your life. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you on another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. I'm Wei-T Lightheart from Bioptimizers. See ya!
At Bioptimizers, our mission is to fix digestion. And a cornerstone of digestion is gut flora. P3OM is our patented probiotic formula. In fact, we call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics. You see, strong proteolytic or protein digesting activity is paramount to having a healthy gut flora. And of course, P3OM provides that. The good news is, unlike weaker probiotics, P3OM survives the digestion process. What it does is it basically multiplies the good guys while protecting you against pathogens, or what some people call the bad guys. P3OM really helps to rebuild your digestion. And what that allows you to do is to maximize nutrient uptake, energy, and metabolism. To find out more of how P3OM can help you, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.